start presentation.
Hello everyone, and welcome to your first EVD showcase of the day. This one is brought to you by Brandon Yang,
Sharmini Joaquin,
David Winchell,
and Sean Dever. And we are Team 22, and this is the engineering efficiency in the nitrogen cycle.
First off, we're going to start off with the table of contents, and we're going to provide an explanation and contextualization of our problem.
Now, to provide a brief overview of our project, we'll be exploring fertilizer overuse within farming and the harmful effects that occur. Now, through our brainstorming and research, we found the most optimal solution is through precision agriculture and a more thorough understanding of soil nutrients within the soil, and then which is reflected within our prototype, which is capable of measuring soil nutrients and displaying it for farmers to further understand their soil conditions and how much fertilizer to apply.
Well, next we'll be going over the nitrogen cycle, which is the key driver of our problem. So this cycle allows nitrogen in the atmosphere to be converted into nitrogen in the soil by bacteria, and this allows them to eventually go back into the atmosphere as atmospheric nitrogen by another set of bacteria, and this is where our problem lies, because this will allow nitrous oxide emissions to be released into the air.
As explained, the nitrification process. And this nitrification process then produces nitrate. This nitrate is used as fuel and growth for the plants. However, when there's an excess, the plants go under, the excess nitrate goes under a denitrification process, which releases nitrous oxide into the atmosphere. Another problem or another issue that arises through the excess use of fertilizer is water eutrophication, which can cause algae blooms, which depletes the oxygen level in the body of water they appear.
And for the problem statement, research shows that around 70% of farmers use fertilizer to grow their crops. However, 65% of those farmers don't use any optimal nitrogen management practices. So because of that, 40 to 80% of nitrogen fertilizer is wasted and also released into the atmosphere, which can cause negative impacts to the surrounding ecosystems. And this problem continues to occur based on a study that says that nitrous oxide emissions have increased by 30% over just this past decade alone. And all this research is just mainly from U.S. farms, but this problem does happen throughout the entire world when there is agriculture. The reason why we're focusing mostly on nitrous oxide is because it is approximately 2.7 times more potent than, say, carbon dioxide.
Now that we provided context to our problem, we're going to go over why this problem should be solved through technical, educational, health, economic, and legal reasons. The first problem is simply a technical problem. Farmers have a hard time of using the exact amount of fertilizer needed in order to optimally grow their plants.
And then in the more educational aspect of our justifications, farmers are highly encouraged by the USDA to familiarize themselves with nitrogen management techniques such as the 4 R's, which include right time, right rate, right space, and right source, and along with other fertilizer application techniques such as drip irrigation and foliar feeding. And then health-wise, such as malaria, cholera, and Scandinus molasses.
Economics. It is estimated that $400 million are wasted on excess fertilizers annually. So this happens every year. And on top of that, the prices of fertilizer is increasing throughout the years. Regarding our legal aspect, there are countries who have established multiple international agreements, such as the Paris Agreement, and there are national laws that the EPA has set in the U.S. to help reduce and regulate greenhouse emissions. Also, the EPA has even faced lawsuits over these laws for failing to regulate nitrous oxide emissions.
Moving on to our developed solution, we created a general outline of how we wanted our solution to function, with our criteria specifying there should be a reduction of nitrous oxide by 30%, displaying effectiveness within a month, and being compatible with current agricultural conditions. And our constraints also show that our solution must be produced sustainably, easy to use, and affordable.
Based off the criteria we provided on the previous slide, we decided to research current pre-existing solutions. the ones we researched here, lime application and slow release fertilizer, each of these solutions have the ability to inhibit the production of nitrous oxide from the nitrogen cycle. Lime application does this through the increase of pH in the soil, which improves the denitrification process. And instead of creating nitrous oxide, it produces more N2 gas or atmospheric oxygen. What the issue with that is increasing pH excessively can also be harmful to the plants you're trying to grow. Slow release fertilizer, on the other hand, releases nutrients in small amounts of time, as said by the name, but the crop yields are extremely delayed, and there's a lot of potential to nutrient loss due to various environmental factors like rain or flooding. Since we weren't particularly satisfied with the previous solutions, we decided to research even more. Both these solutions have the ability to lock nutrients within their soil, but they also have the exact same consequence of being extremely inconsistent in the yield of crops.
Here are 3 different techniques. The next 2 are crop residue management and crop rotations. The only issue with these is that the results are varied and it's hard to get like statistical data on it because it's inconsistent. And we took all those ideas and put it into a decision matrix where we ranked them on various different categories, and it turns out that the best solution was matching fertilizer dose with demand.
Now, alongside our research on past and present solutions, we also conducted our brainstorming, which we have listed and outlined and sketched above.
So we also even sought expert advice. So from Stephanie Casper, which is a UTRGV agricultural program manager, she advised that farmers would be most benefited by having live monitoring over their fields to appropriately apply fertilizer. So we chose to go with this solution, a sensor node module where we can infinitely expand them to become an array of sensors on the field, which will then display data in a map to farmers about their nutrient conditions.
So in order to do this, we would need something called an NPK sensor. This measures the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in the soil in the given area. And in order to have more accurate data, we would need multiple of these sensors alongside with GPS sensors with them. And all of that data would be sent to an API, and we would also need a web application that shows all that data from the API to the farmers. That way they know exactly how much the balance between all of these elements and where the sensors are located. Now, in order to do this, we're going to have additional features because we are going to be having this product outside in the field and it's going to be exposed to the elements. So we're going to need something to protect all the internals. So that's why we're going to have a protective case. Now, another way to make this better is also to have live monitoring. That way the farmers can read the data in real time.
To create this prototype as efficiently as possible, we use subjects from DE, Digital Electronics, Environmental Science, and Computer Science in order to create and connect the Arduino circuits and to explain the nitrogen cycle efficiently.
Moving on to the development of our prototype, here we have a general outline of our engineering process with our initial stages explained in the earlier slides, ranging through the months of September and December. And then in the months of January to April, we have our construction of our prototype with gathering materials, the development of our web application, and an encasement and testing.
So here, on top here are 2 diagrams of our modules that actually go into our project. So for our transmitter module, we have our Arduino GPS sensor, NPK sensor with the receiver, and the transmitter who transmits through radio frequencies to our receiver module, which just has the ESP32 development board and a transceiver. Now these 2 work together to send the data to the database that can be seen below. This is what we plan to have our website look like for our final product.
Next, we have our bill of materials listing the equipment needed and the cost for one whole field sensor. So we have the sensors needed for the circuits, as my partner explained, and then also additional materials to help with our prototype's functions, such as wires, breadboard, and our Arduino Uno, which we have a total cost of $134.
As you can see here, these are our technical drawings. And we took these technical drawings and we turned them into functional CAD models. And with that, we 3D printed materials to make this encasement right here, where we have the internals placed in here, and this is the sleeve that goes around it. And you can see right here, this is to put a stake into the ground. That way it's secure on the farm. And in order to make all these different components work, we needed to import various libraries into our code. And speaking of code, we use 3 different languages, namely CSS, C++, and HTML.
This is right here is gonna be the code for the soil sensor, GPS, and just transmitter Arduino code, which will import and send the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium value over to the ESP32, and that ESP32 will then upload this data over here to the website.
So on this slide, we have a picture of what our website actually looks like right now. So it's a similar concept to the one we showed earlier, but it's not as refined, which we hope to do in the future. But right now it is functional and is sending the website with the data to our API. And here's what our final prototype looks like. It is right here on the table. We managed to fit all our circuits, our breadboard, our Arduino, our ESP32, all into one single box around 170 millimeters by 84 by 62. And here we have a live demo, which I'll be talking over, a video demo, which I'll be talking over, explain what's happening. So here we have our NPK sensor in a plant. It is currently out of the box because it's hard to power all the wires while inside the box. But here you can see the Arduino code is outputting data, updating every 1 to 2 seconds with our code, which also makes it live data management. And here, we'll see soon that we'll switch to the website and see that the website is also being updated with this nutrient data. See here. And each of these nodes are supposed to represent a sensor on a grid, which we hope to allow farmers to manage their own grid and create a grid that represents their own farm and their sensors.
Testing. We then, for the testing, we use the growth of plants. Over here, we decided to test our solution over the course of 10 days using tomato and habanero plants. We split them into 3 different groups: the experimental group, the access group, and the control group. The control group was given amount of fertilizer that was recommended on the package. The control group was the experimental group was the group which we gave fertilizer based off of the NPK sensor, and then the excess group was given an excessive amount of fertilizer based off of the NPK sensor over here. So we wanted to allow the plants to grow over 10 days and record the NPK values and the height values, and then calculate the growth change and analyze the data and draw an eventual conclusion.
So here in our graph of our height for our tomato and habanero plants, we see that our experimental group, which is the group using the sensor and calculation for fertilizer, actually thrived the most because it was most sustainable and most stable. Even though some of the other groups look like they may have grown more in the early period, their change in height of 0 represents their death, and midway through the testing process. And with our nutrient values for each of our plants, we see that the experimental group with our sensor resulted in a lower nutrient value throughout each of our nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium values, which suggests that the other 2 were maybe excessively fertilized and died as a result of that. And we also have some validations for our test. So 5 out of 6 of our nutrients actually showed significant differences in the means of their data, which this means that the nutrient values for the experimental group were significantly different, and this was not due to chance, due to our F statistic and p-value being significantly higher than was expected. So here, based on our graphs, the experimental group, again, using the sensor and calculated fertilizer amounts, performed the test. It's least amount of nutrients, but the most stable and sustainable growth. And this indicates, again, that the other 2 died due to excess fertilizer, excess nutrients available in the soil.
Conclusion. Our prototype was able to and capable of measuring soil nutrients and in real time, and was able to apply promote plant growth while optimizing the amount of fertilizer that was there.
Now, looking towards the limitations of our project, we found that our testing was somewhat short range, as there's a variety of different crops grown, but we were only able to test 2 crops, and then there's also the condition of being able to test around a farm, which we lack the resources and accessibility to one. And also the high initial cost that encompasses it, as 1 field sensor for our prototype was around $134, and then considering that we want to use multiple sensors, the the cost would increase significantly. And then we also found we lacked a convenient source of power, as we used a 12-volt AC/DC power supply, which had to be put into an outlet, which is kind of impractical for the farms.
Okay, so for potential improvements, we'd like to make it more environmentally friendly, because as of right now, it is currently 3D printed plastic, which is, as you may know, not great for the environment. So we're trying to look into making that into like a metal, that way it doesn't harm the environment. And we'd like to start testing on a local farm, because right now when we tested, we did it in a very controlled environment. It was pretty like short range and limited. So we would like to go into an actual big farm and test the range and all the other aspects. And we would like to further develop our website to make it more user-friendly and maybe even display more data and just make it better for the farmers overall.
Now, what is the full impact of our prototypes? Well, through the development of our prototype and the iterations, as my friend has explained earlier, our prototype has the potential to enhance agricultural management for farmers, allowing them proper understanding of their soil conditions, and then integrating more complex systems, technological systems for farming, and then most importantly, helping with the environment by reducing N2O emissions and other environmental concerns.
For acknowledgements, we would like to thank Mr. Rodriguez, our EDU teacher, Ms. Cortez, our environmental science teacher, as well as Stephanie Casper, our parents, and Ms. Houston for all helping us on this journey of creating this prototype and project.
And here are our citations and sources.
Thank you for listening. Does anyone have any questions?
You said that the material is made out of what?
3D printed plastic. What is the specific material?
It is actually PETG plastic. So it's a little stronger.
Okay, and then when you do test it in your real soil or your real farm, have you guys thought of solutions to work for the power source and working with input elements, because it does flood a lot here in farm when there is erosion, so have you thought about that too?
Yes, so for working with the power source, we wanted to use batteries, a 12 volt and a 9 volt, a little bit harder to work with. So for a time constraint, we decided to just keep the power supply. But it would be battery powered if we did do it on the farm. And regarding the flooding, we could look to increasing our barrier on our sensor so that it still gets to the soil, but it kind of blocks the water from entering below or underneath the ground.
What was the most difficult item to integrate in your prototype?
The most difficult item to integrate in our prototype was the ES32 because we had to somehow send the data from our transmitter into the ES32 and then make a website through that.
So the software?
Yeah,
portion
the
is-
software. No wiring, the coding took a lot of time.
And then one more question, why did you decide in your testing, that the last item you said you did double the fertilizer? What was the reasoning behind that one?
So we would have done a control. Unfortunately, all the plants we looked for all came with fertilizer because these are plants being sold to consumers to grow their plants, not for testing. So we instead decided to see if we increase our amount, what would be the effects? And if we did double, because we believe that our amount was like already a good amount, was set for the plant to thrive. So we did double to see how that would affect our plants, and as it died. But on a real farm, it wouldn't die because we're space, and instead it be into the atmosphere.
Thank you.
On top of that,
We have 10 minutes for additional questioning.
Yeah, it was so much.
yeah, on top of that, notice how we said earlier how most farmers actually overuse fertilizer, and that is why ours would be better suited for them. So they know exactly how much fertilizer to put into the ground. So they don't want to overdo it or kill the plants, right? So they want to know exactly how much, like the nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium is in the soil. That way we don't overshoot, right? And it can also save money. Any more questions?
So,
Underclassmen, this is a perfect time for you.
I'd like to statement, I need to write some I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So, what is the effect on global warming of your machine?
I'm sorry, can you
What is the effect on global warming of your machine or experiment?
the effect of global warming, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
The effect of your experiment on global warming, how will it help in global warming?
So as we established before, fertilizers are a source of nitrous oxide emissions, which is a greenhouse gas, which is 2.7 times more potent than carbon dioxide. So it has an effect on the destruction of the ozone layer. So by reducing the amount of nitrous oxide, we're also reducing the damage to the ozone layer.
Well, more than that, of course, nitrous oxide is a greenhouse gas, which is more effective at trapping heat in the atmosphere than carbon dioxide because of its longer time and its different bond structure and its chemistry. But carbon dioxide is more seen as more important just because of more of its impurities.
Another benefit or environmental benefit of this is lack of water runoff, because when there's an excess amount of fertilizer in the soil, when the rain comes, it washes this into our waters, which cause algae blooms, and these algae blooms cause the oxygen level in these bodies of water to severely decrease, which can kill the fish or wildlife in the area.
Obviously these things are quite expensive at $130. So how much area do these machines cover? Like how much would a farmer need to buy to cover 1 acre of farming?
So that actually, the product itself, the sensor itself does not have a range because I believe it's in the immediate area. This sensor checks for nutrients through ion data.
Electronegativity.
Right, yeah, it checks for ions essentially, which helps determine how many nutrients are in there. So I assume that it's like almost in the immediate area of the sensor, but the soil conditions in that area should be similar for quite a large range. As of right now, I do not know that range, but I did not assume that they would need a lot of these, just enough to cover like maybe one per a few feet or yards.
Any other questions?
There are some problems that you mentioned early on that I feel weren't brought up again. You had said that some of the indirect problems that come with increased nitrogen was skin cancer and malaria. So I was just wondering how your product tackles those health concerns. Like how does monitoring reduce those impacts?
Well, the reason why those health concerns exist or happen is because the excess nitrogen leaks into the food weeds, the waters in the area, and then when you consume that causes the illnesses that were listed there.
Okay.
So a decrease of that means a decrease of the general sickness in the area.
And to add on to that, nitrous oxide is actually a chemical that can deplete the ozone layer, and this will lead to more skin cancer as more UV rays enter the earth. And I think this can also increase our sicknesses because of global warming, allowing the range of vectors of diseases like mosquitoes and other bugs to increase their range.
Thank you. I guess I was just confused about the correlation.
Maybe you have any other questions?